Okay.
8:30.
Okay. The regular meeting of the Board of Education for January 8th, 2019 is called to order. Welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. As a reminder, we now have our PPS Ombudsman, Judy Martin, attending all regular board meetings in the back. Judy will be here to listen to the public comments and, if appropriate, provide additional support to families who need or want it. Was all of that unheard? Do I need to go back and do it?
No, I think it was.
Okay. All right. Judy can be reached at 503-916-3045 or ombudsman@pps.net. We also have interpreters with us this evening, and I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time, introduce themselves in the language into which they'll be interpreting, and inform the audience where they'll be located in the auditorium should someone need their assistance.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Muy buenas tardes, feliz año. Me llamo Daniel y voy a estar interpretando en español. Estoy disponible en la parte de atrás por si alguien lo necesita la ayuda. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, my name is Đạo Đón. I'm speak Vietnamese tonight. Xin chào, tôi nói tiếng Việt. Nếu mà cần sự giúp đỡ về tiếng Việt, tôi ngồi ở phía dưới nhé. Cảm ơn.
Добрый вечер, меня зовут Мария, я русский переводчик, я буду сидеть вот там сзади. Пожалуйста, обращайтесь, если нужна моя помощь. Спасибо.
Interpreter Suzanne Lee, and I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and Thai Sign language. 如果你有需要翻譯嘅話咧，我就喺嗰度可以講3種語言。我可以在外邊等你們。如果你需要那個翻譯的，還有台山話，你如果需要幫助，我都可以幫到你。
Thank you. Board members, are there any items in the business agenda that you have questions on? This does not include individual action items listed on tonight's agenda.
Yes, I have a question about one of the contracts, the Prospect Studio contract.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Next, we have student and public comment. Ms. Hewson, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have a total of 5, and we'll start with our 2 students, Zoe Rigel and Ellie Thomas.
As you make your way to the table, I'd like to review guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen without distraction from electronic devices or papers. Board members and the superintendent will not respond to comments or questions during public comment. If you want to follow up from the board office, please contact Ms. Hewson or Roseanne Powell, the board manager. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you give them to Ms. Hewson to distribute. Request to make public comment should be made ahead of time by contacting the board office or checking with Ms. Hewson prior to the start of the board meeting to see if there are spots available. Once the board meeting has started, we can no longer accept new requests for public comment. Okay, presenters will be, you'll have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of your testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. We appreciate your input and thank you for your cooperation. You can begin.
Hi, my name is Ellie Thomas, Thomas, and I'm here to discuss the Jefferson Dancer trip to France, which is under consideration by the board. I'm a senior and I attend Jefferson High School, and this is my 3rd year with the company. My sophomore year on the company, I had the opportunity to tour with the Jefferson Dancers in Aix-en-Provence. We had an amazing time. There were no complications. We walked to and from our venues and around the city easily. The protests happening at the moment are located in the north of France, around Paris, and are already dying down. Aix is in the south. Along with that, last month, President Macron addressed the people of France to come together and put the violence aside. Yes, the protests look bad, but at the same level as the riots we saw in 2016 in our own country. Plus, our trip isn't planned till March, so everything should be de-escalated by then. Another fact is that a lot of these protests are happening in Paris, and though it would be wonderful if we could still go to Paris, I understand that caution should be taken. I wouldn't want to be in a situation where my peers and chaperones were put in harm's way. There have been no protests in Aix, and it is a very small city where it is very unlikely to happen. We also have a letter from a member of the city council in Aix saying that it is safe to travel there. We are not only here to share these facts with you, but we also want you to hear from us, the dancers that are going on this trip. We have worked so hard to prepare for this and raise money. This is my last year on the company, and I have been dancing my whole life to get an opportunity like this. I hope you consider our words when making your decision.
Hello, my name is Zoe Rigel, R-I-D-G-E-L-L, and I am in my second year of being a Jefferson Dancer Company member. I understand it is the administration's job to protect us against international travels. This being said, I would like to share some statistics that may put those risks into perspective. As an American citizen, I have a 1 in 315 chance of being killed by everyday gun violence. According to a study done by the Cato Institute, I have a 1 in roughly 5 million chance of dying in France due to terrorism. In 2018, the number of children ages 12 to 17 killed or injured by gun violence in the United States was 2,664. In this past year, while in 2018, 3 US citizens died in France. One of them was a suicide. According to these statistics, I am roughly 16,000 times more likely to be killed in everyday gun violence than by terrorism in France. I can't express how important this trip is as a cultural exchange to our community and our company. We have worked tirelessly to achieve this goal. We have not been handed this, but have earned this opportunity. We as students take on the pressures of school, along with the rigorous training and hard work and dedication it takes on multiple ends to make this dream a reality. I can assure you that this has not come without great sacrifice from both students and families. This being said, I believe this experience outweighs any small risks we face while traveling in Aix. Thank you.
Next, we have Amy Kyler and James Posey.
Good evening. My name is James Posey, P-O-S-E-Y. I'm typically here on other matters related to construction and business, but here tonight, I'm here as the new board chair of BPI. And quite honestly, I'm shocked that I'm actually sitting here before you, because up until a couple hours ago, we were told that our contract for BPI was coming before your board and that it had been pulled. And I was already on the agenda, and I understand that you're going to reconsider it in a couple of weeks after several questions would be answered. And I got the questions to be answered about 4 o'clock this afternoon. And frankly, I'm pretty disturbed by that. As the new board chair, I think most of you all read the newspapers and you know the trauma and the situation with BPI and what we've been going through for the last several months. And our new interim director, Iris Bell, has been in contact with DUIA and people who we thought would be representing our issues to this body, answering all the questions that would allow us to get our contract signed, and we could move on to dealing with the ongoing issues of BPI and providing those services that we've been providing for quite some time. So I guess I'm a little frustrated that I even have to be here to talk to you guys, and I've got one of your questions right in front of me. It says, would you share the governance training your new board has been provided, including the training, and if all have been trained? Well, heck, we only been a new board for a month or 2 months and a half, and so that's an inappropriate question, and it just feels like we're being attacked. And I know you all have stewardship over these programs, and you have to assure that you're getting everything out of the programs, and we're all accountable. But come on, please, give us a break. I'm a retired person, and I've had many sleepless nights trying to pull BPI back around this new board. I think Amy talked to me earlier. We've reconfigured the board. We've done everything. What bothers me most about this is that we've been in contact with you all for over a month about what our situation, what our status is, and now we get right up to the point where the contract comes before you and you all pull it. I don't understand. I don't get it. Listen, we've been keeping those lights on in that organization basically on a shoestring. We've gotten, I think our people have provided you with a more stable, a much more stable organization financially, the board, the whole 9 yards. So what are you guys trying to do to us? Why aren't you trying to help us? We're dealing with one of the most vulnerable populations in the city. It doesn't appear as though y'all get that. So I don't have too much to say. Is that I think tonight, you ought to reconsider, get our contract, sign it, and let's get on with the business of saving our kids and working with them to build what we have to build.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Amy Sutton.
Okay. Thank you for everybody's comments. Please feel free to connect with our board manager, Roseanne Powell, if you have something specifically you want to follow up with the board or board office. Okay, superintendent's report.
Good evening, directors and audience. I hope and trust everybody had a restful holiday break. Happy 2019. Hope our students had a chance to, and our educators to relax and rejuvenate a little bit. We have a very busy second semester and working very hard to make sure it is a productive year. So we're continuing to hit the ground running in a few areas. So I'm going to ad-lib a little bit of what I've outlined I was hoping to talk about tonight, particularly as they relate to our core educational mission. We know that to accelerate and improve on student outcomes, there's a few elements that are a foundation that are very critical. That includes core curriculum, a focus on instructional strategies, a thoughtful use of assessments to engage in continuous improvement. So I just wanted to say a few words on each of those topics just as an update. As our board knows, our educators have not had the benefit of a provided for scope and sequence across grade levels and content areas to help provide some guidance to ensure that our students, regardless of school they attend, are working towards meeting some grade level expectations that we all can agree are important to have some mastery around. So this year has really represented our first year effort at iterating some units of study. We've had many teachers participating in that work. We continue to receive feedback on trying out those lessons. This is sort of an open source curriculum because we know our teachers have a variety of instructional materials and resources available to them or not, and some favorite material that they enjoy integrating. So we want to make sure that they're able to make professional judgments about the resources they use to try to make sure our students are working on some particular standards and concepts month to month. So that work continues in earnest. I know that our high school science teachers are also kicking off a similar body of work. Our goal is that by the end of the school year that we have some more solid first versions of units of study in English language arts, math, and science. And a lot more work will remain to iterate those as well as tackle other content areas. All of that work requires not just producing guidance, but also giving our educators sufficient planning and collaboration time so they can have thoughtful conversations about how students are experiencing the learning and to make sure they have supports and coaching where possible and our principals themselves to serve as effective instructional leaders. So kudos to our teaching and learning and our school performance team for prioritizing monthly all-day opportunities for all of our school leaders to familiarize themselves as well with this core curriculum. Curriculum's not enough. We also have to have effective instructional strategies, particularly to meet the needs of students who require additional supports to access content, whether you're a second language learner or you're a subgroup of student who we have not yet ensured experience success. And so instructional strategies are also another important part of conversation to make sure all of our students are progressing in meeting grade level expectations. Now you can have curriculum and you can have a repertoire of strategies as an educator, but you have to have assessment built in to actually query to see if students are learning. And as a big proponent of authentic assessment, the most valuable assessments will always be in the classroom with what students demonstrate in their learning, whether it's in public presentation or portfolio, or any number of ways that teachers in their daily moves are assessing students' learning. We also want to make some formatives or some diagnostic assessments available to our teachers so they can be really concrete about the next set of skills or reading behaviors that our students may need support with. Beyond the classroom, it's also important to have some district-wide benchmark assessments so that we're getting a snapshot of how our students are doing across schools and so that we can also deploy some supports and interventions, additional planning time and coaching where possible, so that we're meeting our own performance targets for student learning and growth. Now, there's been a lot of questions and also, I think, a lot of assumptions about the role of summative assessments. In the state of Oregon, our State Board of Education spent a year reviewing what should be the state test here in Oregon. They landed on the Smarter Balanced Assessment, the SBAC. School districts are accountable for making sure they have a 95% participation rate on the SBAC. We're not proponents of investing a lot of valuable instructional time on test prep. I think our students should know the format of the test, but we are confident if they've learned something, they'll do well on it. So we don't want to overemphasize the SBAC test per se, but it does give us a snapshot, albeit looking a little bit backwards in the information it provides around some of the systemic work that we need to do to make sure we're serving all of our students. I also understand that there's a history in Oregon of families feeling like perhaps that's not the most valuable way to have my students spending their school time. So there exists the option and the right to opt out of that test. So I just want to make it clear that that option is still there. And ironically, we're also accountable for making sure as a school system that we have a sufficient participation rate. So I just wanted to clarify that sort of unscripted way, some more explicit opinion on curriculum, instruction, and assessment, because without those three, it's very difficult to engage in continuous improvement conversations or to maximize instructional time if we don't know how our students are doing. And assessments are a critically important way that we get information about how our students are learning. So I wanted to also speak a little bit about another important topic, and that's student safety, and more specifically, school resource officers. Student safety has to be our #1 priority always. Not just physical safety, but also emotional safety of our students, positive culture, school cultures and climates, so that students can thrive and focus on learning. Those are always going to be very important to us. Recently, we have taken up the topic of the role of school resource officers, and this is sort of a tool in the tool belt that, on occasion, over 5,000 occasions to be exact, where our principals felt there was a sufficient safety concern to call on the police bureau to deploy a specially trained school resource officer. Student discipline remains an issue at the school level, primarily with our school leaders and our counselors, and we will always be proponents of a continuum of support for our students, but there are instances where a police officer needs to be in place so that our school staff and our students are not put in a predicament to intervene with a danger on campus. So we, on a kind of accelerated timeline, agree that we need to continue listening to our students. We will be continuing to work with our student leaders to make sure we publish a series of meetings where we continue to hear our students' concerns about student safety. We think there are many suggestions and recommendations and concerns that are within our sphere of influence to improve on, and we are interested in doing that. We also want the opportunity in these discussions to clarify what has been the role of school resource officers and to capture concerns and questions from our students. We will be sure to synthesize our learnings, and we'll make sure our board of directors know when those meetings will be happening, so that you can participate if you would like. I just want to make sure that because we understood the timeline was in fact not what it truly is at this point, it seems that the city will not be hearing this item for at least a number of weeks. We may have shortchanged some engagement that we would have preferred to have engaged in, but we're going to continue to have them. So I just wanted to spend a moment speaking to that topic. The other ways that we want to continue to be transparent and hold ourselves accountable to not just student achievement, not just in student safety, but also in just being fiscally healthy and sound. We just heard about our annual comprehensive audit, known as the CAFR, which is available for anyone who would like to review. No shortage of pages of spreadsheets, which we learned came back very clean. So congrats to Deputy Soup Hertz and our new CFO, Cynthia Lay, and the team's really hard work in making sure that all of our public dollars were well accounted for, and I think we were all very impressed with, and I think the auditors were impressed that fiscally we're very sound in our bookkeeping. And that matters partly because for us as folks who are interested in being good public stewards of public dollars, it's important that we be accountable to making sure the investments are high leverage. There's been another audit that's been going on in the school system. Many of you may be familiar with Secretary of State Dennis Richardson calling on a series of audits looking at agencies across the state of Oregon. One of those involves the Oregon Department of Education as well as Portland Public Schools as sort of a case study of public education dollars in the state of Oregon. The release of that, I think it's been 10 to 12 months now, report is anticipated to be published tomorrow. And so we will be sure that the public is able to sort of see that report as well as the school district's response to some of their recommendations. and findings. What we can say at this point, knowing that this report is embargoed at the moment, is that this new administration and board leadership is well aware of some historical areas that required correction, and many of those practices have already been in the spotlight for us as practices that have already been remedied or corrected for, and our work remains very focused on building out best practice, evidence-based work in the school system. So stay tuned for more on that, and I'll leave it at that, because tonight you're going to hear many more details about some of the work that has continued to happen internally with both our audit committee and our business and operations team. So just wanted to make a commercial plug there. I'm going to end with other achievements that are not so academic of the athletic nature, because we're in the midst of the winter season, and was able to spend my Saturday night at 3 basketball games. I got to see Lincoln play. I got to see the Benson girls playing the highly ranked Grant High School team. Benson came out on top there. And then I was able to stay for an action-packed, always electric boys basketball game between Jefferson and Grant boys. It was down to the wire in the last few seconds, but Grant managed to beat their opponents by a point. And we want to continue to encourage our scholar athletes to excel. That also includes our female students. So we have a little video clip to share with you that really aims to promote girls' empowerment.
In 20 years in working education and working with young people, I've never been disappointed with what I have seen and found and learned from young people. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm humbled I had the chance today to sit down and talk with you about what some of my experiences have been, to hear from you about what some of your experiences are, and then to hear from the amazing people in this room.
So we're at Franklin High School, part of our Pacific Office Automation Holiday Classic. Behind me is our first Young Women's Empowerment breakfast, and the intent of that is to expose young women to successful women.
If you look for opportunities, you don't have to have a path, but you are opening doors and leaving doors open to you that you can walk through when you want to.
And this is the Women's Empowerment Breakfast, where we get to hear from all types of different amazing women who've had some type of athletic career or have worked within sports, and how that's kind of been a vehicle for them to succeed in the future. And they're kind of just talking to us about their careers and stuff that they're doing now.
I could do something with what was this natural skill that I had the opportunity to evolve into the talent that it could be, and could take me to where it is I wanted to go.
So we have very, very successful people in the room, so girls will have a chance to talk to them and talk about their dreams, their ambitions, and hear some of the pitfalls that they went through that they can perhaps help them avoid.
Like, my piece of advice for like my 16-year-old self would be like to just stay focused and not pay so much attention to like what other people think.
Walk in a room, if you're a total baller, walk into the room like you are that, and you own that room, and you be that, and use that as your entry point.
So what are the things we can give to them besides just playing in a tournament that could help them later on in their lives? So we're excited to be able to provide them that opportunity.
The first kind of key to everything that I was able to accomplish is this. Basketball is just a vehicle. It's just a vehicle. And what I mean by that is it's the tool you're going to use to get you wherever you'd like to go. But it's not the destination. It's not who you are.
I'm not super sure what I want to do in my future career-wise, but hearing how a lot of these women didn't know what they were going to do yet while they were in high school, and all the incredible things they're doing now, just shows me that I can do something really incredible in the future, even though I may not be sure of what my path is right now.
Thank you to everyone who is involved with supporting our Young Women's event and continuing to encourage their empowerment and leadership. The past few days, I've continued to do my regular school visits. I want to thank the students and the teachers at Lent, Chapman, and Bridger for sharing with me a lot of their wonderful work the last few days. And this coming week, we'll be focused on the arts, so we'll see you at the Jefferson Dancer recital, as well as, I think, the first district-wide middle and high school band gathering. So I'm looking forward to that. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is Division 22 report to the community. And Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item?
Yeah, we have Dr. Yvonne Curtis, who will share with you.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members, Superintendent Guerrero. So I sit before you to present the Division 22 report, which is required by ODE that we present to you and have it in our minutes in our agenda to give to ODE on February 1st. What's different about this year is that last year I sat in front of you and gave you the same report, and that is because typically in the past, ODE has asked us to report on the current year, and now they're asking us to report on the prior year. So this is the second report on 2017-18. However, we have noted in here everything that we're doing to become compliant on each of the items raised. I'll just very quickly say, in terms of the prevention education programs in drugs and alcohol, we're implementing a plan district-wide that puts us in compliance for this year. Human sexuality, we're currently implementing the plan as well, district-wide, which will put us in compliance for the 18-19 school year. So you'll hear that on next year's report. In terms of the media programs, I want to say that Portland Public Schools has done an amazing job at investing more in library support than many of the districts around us. We have committed to making sure the libraries are open full-time and that we have at least a half-time certified media specialist in K-5, K-8s, and 6-8s, and full-time media specialists in schools that are 80% or more historically underserved, and in our high schools. We're also working towards an integrated service delivery plan for library services that will ensure comprehensive, equitable library programming in all of our schools. We also have some project goals, which is to align all of our library standards and the learning goals that will happen in all of our schools so that they line up with our core curriculum, the GVC. Instructional materials adoption. For math, science, health, and PE, we are working to develop a guaranteed and viable curriculum, but we are out of sequence in terms of the materials adoptions, much like many other districts. By June 2019, our scope and sequence in all of those areas will be complete except for PE. PE, we will complete that process when we're meeting the full state PE instructional minutes requirement. Secondary ESL adoptions, we are currently in compliance. With the adoption, the elementary adoptions are not in compliance, but were included in our whole literacy, the equity-based balanced literacy program, or materials. We have requested an extension for this school year, and if we need to do that going forward while we align things, we'll continue to do that. And to determine if we need to submit a K-5 independent adoption or whether what we currently have will suffice. In terms of complaint procedures, we had on January 1st, 2018, we had one outstanding item, which was to complete the AD, which is now posted on our website. For our talented and gifted programs, we were out of compliance last year, and at the beginning of the year weren't yet in compliance, but we will have completed our first round of professional development by the end of this month. So that will put us in compliance in terms of making sure all teachers are trained at how to provide student service on rate and level, which is what our state requires for all students that are identified as talented and gifted. And then we're continuing to work with the TAG Act group, and I believe it is our next work session when our district TAG director and others involved in that work will be sharing with the board what that work looks like. Are there any questions?
I have not a question, but a request, and this is really to you, Deputy Superintendent Hertz, to explicitly call out some of these Division 22 requirements that are unmet in the budget process, to show us the delta to compliance. So for the adoption of materials, the PE mandate, but just to make that direct connection in the budget process so we could see it and consider it.
We will work together on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to go back. I wasn't really clear on what you said about the elementary ESL materials. You said something about that's part of the elementary and the balanced literacy adoption, or can you clarify what you were saying about that?
I'm going to refer to the sentences here to make sure that I don't confuse you again. Get that one. So in 2004, we adopted Avenues, as is many people in the state did that. And then due to budget restrictions, PPS was granted a waiver in 2014 that enabled us to continue using current materials. And then we're requesting another extension for this school year. In the summer, after our instructional framework and scope and sequence is completely completed, then we'll determine whether to submit for a K-5 independent adoption or move forward on a state-approved adoption. So the reason we're waiting is because it's content-based, to make sure that we have all our standards identified and the priority standards identified for each of those other content areas, to make sure that we're looking at everything instead of just literacy. For now, the literacy adoption, part of the resources in the literacy adoption are some of the resources they're using for ELL services.
So I would be interested, because in my experience, most of the time, it would be stronger to use material that's specifically created to improve English proficiency. So we're looking at kind of our own adoption, similar to the evidence-based or the balanced literacy adoption. That would be more maybe a bundle of our choice rather than going on what the state has approved for curriculum for ESL.
So I know that the field continues to shift. There hasn't been total consensus in the field about whether you take a specific program and you do forms and functions versus doing a content-based approach. But at this point, we feel like the first right step is to make sure we've got all of our standards and our curriculum identified. We've prioritized standards in all of the content areas before we consider what step we would take next.
Yeah, and the missing piece that we know is the data piece, and having somebody that's able to really help us look at what the progress has been and the trajectory of proficiency, change in proficiency certainly. So when we bring somebody on board, it would be really helpful to kind of get a baseline of what that's looked like.
So the good news is I've been working more closely with our system planning and performance team and realizing we actually have a plethora of data in PPS. What we haven't had was an easy way to bring it forward, look at it, analyze it, and we are working on a plan right now, and I hope to bring you some information next week about how we're going to move forward on data, becoming a data-driven district. In the next 6 months, we'll be developing a plan that will be ready to provide the professional development beginning in June and over the summer. And we're also, along with that is the refresh of our dashboard. And we also have an RFP out right now for the tracking of the whole MTSS or early warning pieces that we will identify. So a lot of work is happening in the next month to get clear about where we're moving forward. So I think we'll have a lot to share with you by the end of this school year and certainly over the summer and next fall.
Great.
So
Just-
again, waiting
Great.
for that
Okay.
and making sure that our decisions are informed by data
Yes.
and that we're looking at what is our core curriculum and that we have all of that set. And teachers have been engaged and are a part of that work. Will help us make sure that whatever we determine is the right step to go for ELL students and where we want to go with the program in the future, we'll be doing it sort of what needs to come first will come first, instead of lately it feels like we've been playing catch up with a lot of things. So we're hoping to
think we have.
give us a little space to put some of these things in place and do it right.
I also knew that I think that there was some issues with ODE and the compliance with ESL, so I just want to keep track of that, I think I
Did
really
you say
would
with
like to.
PE?
No, ODE.
Oh.
There was, you know more about the ESL piece. Were we in?
$34.99.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to be out of compliance. We needed to be raising our results much more than we have.
Yeah, I mean, so I know that, I think that progress has not been as rapid in language acquisition.
Proficient, mhm.
Yeah, so just, again, I'm going to keep an eye out on that, so thanks. And
Definitely, we'll
really
look at
excited
the
about the
data
data
and
coming.
analyze it.
Great.
And just to underline again, I mean, we share your concern, Director Sparza Brown, and also to Director Constam's point. There has been a focus on making sure that those supplemental materials help to provide our English learners access, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure all our educators are supported with strategies for language development, but it will be a good exercise for us to really cost out what it would take to not just do integrated ELD, but really provide the specially designed material that's going to be most helpful to our ELs. So stay tuned.
Right, yeah. And another piece was, and the preparation of teachers to know the instructional strategies. So, yeah, that's another really good budget.
So once again, lots of conversations to be had with our higher eds to continue, who are preparing these teachers to work in our classrooms.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so when the data work that you're talking about, you said you're going to bring that to the board sometime
So
soon? What's
what
that?
I'll be sharing is a plan that we're developing on how to get started on the work to develop a comprehensive plan so that we can start professional development. So it's like a plan for getting the plan done and who all gets included in that and how we identify what are the data protocols and so forth. So I just wanted you to know that's happening in the next few weeks to get our head wrapped around that piece.
Okay.
I will share that information with the board when we have that together. And then by June, we'll have the multi-year plan for how we become data-driven and data smart and data literate as an entire system.
Okay, yeah. Would that be like a work session?
We haven't even had a chance to talk
Still
about it,
figuring
so.
that out.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking.
I think a work
also
session makes sense.
The assessment framework.
Yes.
That would be useful to get us more grounded in that.
We'll
Okay.
include all of that.
And-
Yeah, so work session probably is the best format.
And there was the complaint procedure, just reminding the public that the one thing we were out of compliance on was not having an administrative directive. And now that we do, that's AD, is the shorthand.
Yes. Thank you sorry I used the acronym.
Director Burnett-Fritz.
Yes, I had a question about the tag
Mhm.
portion. You said that by the end of this year, that the professional development on rate and level will be completed?
By the end of January.
Okay, by the end of January. Is our compliance, does that equate compliance, or would compliance be that students actually get instruction at rate and level?
So the compliance part is making sure we're doing our part as a district to provide the professional development, get plans in place, and support teachers in implementing the strategies to address rate and level.
So it's not just that they've had the PD, but it's actually being implemented. And
Yes,
and
that.
when will that happen by?
So our expectation as we provide the PD is that that's happening as we develop tag plans. So I know that, for example, we've just finished, and in fact, I was just talking to our assessment person today. So we've finished the screening for the second grade COGAT, and now the referrals are happening and looking at other data within the schools. Then those kids get referred. We do other assessment as soon as they're identified. Then our TAG facilitators will cycle back around to the schools to assess teachers with new students who are identified and be checking in. We have TAG TOSAs who are making the rounds of schools all the time to be working with teachers, checking in on how is that going with the strategies we've taught you around using rate and level, supporting principals who might ask them to come in. What we don't have completed yet, like in many things we're doing, we don't have a really tight accountability process yet, because we simply don't have enough people to implement that. So the first step is making sure you offer the professional development, make sure every school has a plan, and that those things are aligned along with the strategies that you're teaching teachers to use, and that you have support for the teachers, and keep coming back around to check to see that they're getting the support they need to help students. So all of that is in the works. How it's happening school by school, I couldn't report that to you yet.
I guess, and sorry, just to keep belaboring the point, but so you're a parent of a fifth grader who was identified several years ago, and how do we know, how does that parent know that their student is getting the appropriate rate and level? And how are we going to know that as a system versus a savvy parent, knowing that my student's getting, has been not only identified, but it's getting appropriate rate and level? How are we systematically going to
So right now, how we're systematically doing that is having the TOSAs check in with teachers and with the students to see what is happening for the students. We don't have an accountability sort of check-off matrix kind of accountability system happening yet, because we just got our new TAG director who's just putting some of these things in place. And I think we have 3 TAG TOSAs and her to do all of our schools, so.
I mean, ideally down the road, it should be the same structure that supports differentiated instruction
Right.
for students on IEPs and
Right.
English language learners in the same accountability framework,
Well, and
or same type.
frankly, the strategies that we are hoping to provide teachers all the PD they need to keep developing those strategies that require you to teach in the way that the shifts of the Common Core standards help you get kids to that knowledge and skills we want them to acquire, should meet all of the kids' needs, because that is the way those standards are written, is to help you with that differentiation. But it's a lot to do at one time, right? And it all falls on that classroom teacher. So right now our process is a support process. We're here, we'll come in and train you, we'll come back and help you, call on us, parents call on us. That's where we're at with the process.
I think to Director Brim Edwards' question, and I think the point that Director Constant was making, in the same way that students with disabilities have IEPs, our TAG identified students should have an articulated plan, and our schools and our teachers know who those students are, and so how do we ensure to our families that, the rate and level and the differentiation that they're entitled to, that they're being provided that experience. And so, we're going to continue to work on that, and they're getting some TOSA support, but we want to systematize and institutionalize that a lot more. I mean, that's our work.
And we will have the staff who do that work at the board work session. So I will pass on these questions and make sure that they're ready to respond to those and give you some examples.
Well, as we think about our parent engagement work going forward, this is one more training education unit we could have for parents to help be a piece of that accountability.
And just as a comment off of Director Grimm-Edwards' questions, I don't know if you've seen, but there's been a very active debate in Education Week prompted by James DeLiesel about how the kind of classroom differentiation you're talking about our teachers giving simply doesn't work. There is no time. It's not humanly possible to give the level of differentiation that our enormously diverse classrooms need. I commend that to your attention. It's very disturbing in the likelihood of our being able to achieve what we want to with the resources we've got.
It's big work. I know that on average, there may be studies that show that, but I certainly have been in classrooms where teachers are very adept at doing that. And so I'm going to be optimistic that all of us working together as a team, committed to providing what our students need, we will get there.
So this is just a commentary, and I think a question. I know when the Oregon Department of Education or the State Board of Education made the switch to do the look back, there was questions raised about sort of how useful it is to be looking, I mean, we're frankly looking at something we looked at a year ago. I would encourage the district to keep the framework that we had previously, which is where are we right now, not where were we last year, because that's really backwards looking exercise, and I think we need to be forward looking. So regardless of what the state decision was, as I say, it doesn't really do us any good. Like we were out of compliance in 6 areas, but the question is, and I think the value from the old system that they had when we were reporting on the sort of current year is that you actually were able to make adjustments, real-time adjustments that could move the dial in terms of not just compliance, but moving things forward. So I would hope that we not just view this as sort of a compliance-related exercise to check the box and get it done, because like that was last year, but really, how are we doing in our current year? And to Director Comstan's point, what types of things can we do, or what levers do we have to move us forward?
And I think our systemic instructional improvement work, it's not guided by Division 22. I think it is a compliance exercise that hopefully we won't have issue, articulating that we're in compliance with. We want to go a whole lot deeper than that. I mean, we've just talked about a few areas. They're big categories of work. Even when you look at TAG, I mean, a lot of states, GATE is not a compulsory mandated program. They're increasingly moving towards personalized learning planning because it says that all kids, have gifts and talents that at some point in their work week, there's opportunity for them to work on those. The other categories are not just in the subject areas that we assess for, they're also in leadership and arts and creativity. And so we're not identifying students in those areas here as well. So, and at the same time, there are some really bright students who need that kind of rate and level rigor as well. So how do we do it all? How do we make sure our classroom learning provides open-ended and tasks enough to allow them to flourish like that too?
Any other questions?
Yeah, do you know offhand which other metro area school districts are out of compliance in one form or another?
So a brief survey I did last year, most districts have some areas that they're out of compliance in. We're required, unless this got changed as well, to have it posted on our website, but you can go to another district and just pop it in, and you should be able to see where other districts are in or out of compliance. And I also, what I found when I did that research is standards vary. on whether districts consider themselves in or out of compliance.
It would be interesting to do a survey like that, especially in areas like we just talked about in ESL or ELD, how others are supporting ELs in their district, because as the data shows, those are areas that probably every district in the state is struggling with as well.
As well as textbook adoptions or materials adoptions and some of those others that are closely tied to resource.
Are we doing any materials adoptions right now, that process?
No, not currently, because we need to finish the JVC core work, and we'll be finished with all the content areas. However, as asked, we had already thought about bringing information to the board on what those costs might be, along with here would be a possible plan and approach to start and start to make progress. What we know is right now we don't have the time to do a full process in order to have the materials and be ready to go in the fall, but we certainly could think of budgeting in this budget cycle to move forward on an adoption, and then to make sure we do the appropriate work next year so that we're purchasing, for example, teacher materials before the end of the year and then ready for the following year. So we're going to bring some information through this budget process on, what we might do if we wanted to start to take the steps in that direction.
I think we all want to get into the rhythm and ritual of a refresh cycle for our curricular materials. I know Dr. Valentino, our CAO there, salivates at the thought of making sure that our students have updated materials so that they're not learning from 22-year-old math textbooks in high school. And that everybody knows, just like with technology, that you have a refresh cycle.
As part of that, I'd like to see what the actual process is for the adoption, particularly around public participation that's mandated as part of
Which we
state
would
law,
definitely
state
bring
regulation.
to the board what that process would be before we would start that process.
Awesome. Thanks.
At least that's been my practice in the past, is to have all that guidance public, transparent, and also definitely have specific ways to engage parents in the process.
Okay, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is related to performance auditing and audit committee work. I'm going to ask Director Brim Edwards and Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz to lead the discussion.
We have PowerPoint.
We're looking for slides on the screen, please.
Is that all it takes? Apparently. So this evening, we're going to be providing an update on the auditing function that we have here at PPS, and really auditing for excellence and equitable outcomes for students. And this is really a collaborative endeavor between the audit committee and district staff, led by Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz. And sort of the first thing we've done is sort of outlined what our priorities are for auditing, and really, I think we all know that if we maximize and use our resources effectively, that means more money in the classroom and to support our students. So we've established an audit committee. I'm chairing it. Director Rosen and Director Anthony serve on it. We have 2 positions for community members. We currently have one of those positions filled, and we'll be filling the other ones. We also, a major priority this year in terms of auditing relates to our comprehensive annual financial report. And Deputy Superintendent, you want to?
So we concluded our 17-18 report, comprehensive CAFR comprehensive annual financial report, and it was presented first to the audit committee and then to the board this year. And if you were here in our meeting in December, you know that we had our lead auditor report to us from TKW that we had a clean audit with no findings. So it was a big celebration in the finance department, who put in months and months of work to get that clean audit. And it's a turning of the tides of hope in our department and getting things on track, and really everyone leaning into excellence in that part of our district. And we are implementing even higher standards in 18-19 as we've formed, having Chief Financial Officer Cynthia Lay join us, as well as having Tracy Pinder, our Director of Finance, and soon we will be hiring our Director of Budget, so that team all together, with having a full permanent fully staffed team, will be just an amazing. It just warms my heart, is all I can say. I can hardly wait. But we will be working with the audit committee for 2018-19 again to the auditors will come for a pre-audit in May. We'll make sure that we connect with the audit committee during their visit.
So in addition, as board members might recall, in May and June, when we were going through the budget cycle, included in the board office budget was funding for 2 new internal performance auditor positions. It's best practice to have more than one, especially of a entity of this size. We posted it. We have a pool of candidates. Tomorrow we have the interviews, so hopefully we will be coming with a recommendation to the board on the candidates for the 2 auditor positions.
And then we have also started we've contracted a performance auditor firm for doing the analysis of the budget gap for the 2017 bond. They're actually doing, by March 31st, they'll be reporting to the board on that budget gap for 2017. But they will also be continuing on, and we will have them on an annual basis, giving us an annual performance audit of our bond program each year. So by June 30th, we'll have the full performance audit report on our part of our annual basis, and then we have a contract with them for multiple years to continue that on an annual basis.
So in addition, once we hire our internal performance auditors, the audit committee will be creating our 2019 performance audit plan. And I'll show you in a minute sort of how we have it sketched out over the next 6 months, how we're going to undertake the work.
And one of the things that the audit committee will do is review both our funding limitation as well as our spending pattern with our local option levy to confirm we're in what's approved by the voters, as well as within the statutory limitation on local option levies. So we'll bring that back to the audit committee during the year.
So in just wrapping up, before we get to the state audit division audit, we've also already updated the board policy on our internal performance auditing, so we will be in good shape as we hire and onboard our new auditors, that they have a framework and a clear sort of connect into the district staff, and also understand the expectations and their relationship with the board. So this is just a quick snapshot of the work over the next 6 months. So you take the priorities, and we've scheduled out between now and June each month the work plan. And for those things that require board action, following committee action, we'll be sending things to the full board for either review, presentation, or action. So next up As referenced earlier by the superintendent, tomorrow we're expecting the release of the audit from the State Audit Division. It's going to be, it's confirmed 10:45 tomorrow morning. I think it's important to note that PPS has a long track record of supporting performance and financial auditing as best practice. Going back to 2004, PPS had an internal performance auditing function, and we're one of the few districts in the state that have had an internal performance auditor on staff, and probably will be the first one to actually have two. In addition, so as the Secretary of State's audit comes out, not only will we be sort of embracing the recommendations as a way for sort of continuous improvement, I think it's important to note that this audit was requested by the Secretary of State's audit office, and we were the first district in the state to have one of these from the Secretary of State's office. So it was a political request from the head of the Secretary of State's office. It also, when the audit's released, people will see that it's actually an audit of PPS and the Oregon Department of Education, which is sort of an unusual thing to do, because two entities that have separate governing bodies, separate leadership, but we're sort of smashed together with ODE. So they'll be responding to the findings and recommendations relating to ODE, and ours are a whole completely separate set of recommendations. I think it's important to note that the auditors have been here at the district for almost a year, and I know that staff provided full cooperation, lots of materials, the board provided information to them, and it was sort of a continuous set of requests, and I think we entered into it with the spirit of we're transparent and accountable, and we want to share the information, whatever information the auditors would want. Tomorrow, when the audit is released, we'll be providing a full response from the district, not only of our responses to their specific recommendations, but also providing some context from our point of view. And I think it's important to note that many of the observations that will likely be made tomorrow are going to be no surprise to the school community. If you think about this as a snapshot back to 2016, that's generally what we have. We have a lot of work underway, and many of the issues that were raised were already have actions in response to what we self-identified as areas and needing an improvement, or whether that we could strengthen. And then we also will be indicating that we'll be implementing the recommendations as well.
So some of the things that are already underway, the board successfully brought in a new educational leader and a superintendent who has recruited a very diverse senior leadership team that comes with urban experience from across the country. And we've had a work plan in place, not only last year, but we've had it for 4 years. Yeah. Okay, and we are in a visioning process this year that will lead then to our strategic plan, and we are using all that work as we're building our budget this spring, and we'll continue on into the fall into a multi-year finance plan. Educationally, we've had for over 1,000 students, 2 new middle schools opened for better middle school educational opportunities for our students. And we have a standards-based instructional system that it's coherent and aligned from PK to 12th grade, and is embedded with our guaranteed viable curriculum that we were talking about earlier this evening, as well as professional development for our teachers and principals. And then just want to highlight that tomorrow morning on our main page, there'll be a link where you can get our response, our detailed response to all the recommendations from the Secretary of State.
So next steps between the audit committee and Deputy Superintendent Hertz and district staff will be building an audit action plan. Staff will report to the audit committee and the board on a quarterly basis on progress towards completion of any of the recommendations that weren't already completed, since many of them are. And in addition, the way that the audit is set up is it's bifurcated. There are some very specific staff recommendations relating to staff work, and then there's some very specific recommendations for the board. And the board, some of those recommendations fall into the category of developing policy or providing specific types of oversight. So in addition to staff developing and reporting to the audit committee on their work, the board will develop responsive policies and implement our board's specific recommendations. I think we've got a great roadmap put together, and I think a commitment to get the work done. I'm going to ask if any members of the board want to ask questions about the planning for the audit, or any reflections on the Secretary of State's audit that's going to be shared tomorrow.
There's one thing I would like to add, and that is that this really is about our core values and our equitable outcomes for all students. Looking for excellence, rising to that excellence bar. The internal auditing and continuous improvement is all about our students and the focus on students. So that, while this may cause a lot of things for us to produce internally to get the word out on what all the great practices we're doing and the improvements we're making, what's important is to lead the charge of that focus on our student and the equitable outcomes.
And I would add to that it is kind of ironic that this gives us the opportunity to fully talk about the work that we have underway across the system in terms of transformation, which we've been communicating to the public in bits and pieces and through superintendent's reports and various work streams. But it's actually in response to this audit, I think we'll be able to communicate a lot more fully about work that is already underway, some of which has already started to take root and make a difference for our students. So it's a positive opportunity in that respect.
We encourage the public to take a close read of the district's response, which I think does a pretty good job of objectively trying to articulate what all those efforts have been and acknowledge the areas where we still have a lot of work to do.
Amy makes a really good point, and I also want to just acknowledge the hard work that has gone into this, and we do have a lot to show of progress. So beginning with, I think, a great hire that we did with our leader, and the team that we have now that are working their tails off, and we see differences. So I want to really make sure that we acknowledge that hard work and appreciate it. It's making a difference for our students, and it will only continue.
Well, just to hit the volleyball over the net, let's recall that the audit also makes requests and reflection from the board's own leadership as well. So thank you for your collaboration and shared ownership and accountability there.
So we should probably warn you all, the PPS response is 32 pages. So grab a cup of coffee before you open the webpage. And I just want to reiterate a lot of what's already been said. I think our board response is actually a really excellent summary of a lot of the work that's going on, and has been going on for a while now, probably, well, how long have you been here? 15 months? And I think it will, my hope is that it will reassure parents and educators and the public that PPS is changing. I don't think you will hear anybody suggest that there isn't more room for improvement. But for anybody who's been paying attention to PPS for a while, it's been evident that there was a great deal of room for improvement. And we are improving. Things are changing. Processes are now in place that didn't exist before. We have whole departments that were missing that now exist. And there's been a tremendous amount of movement in a very short time. If you look at people's faces, we all look a little tired, but we've earned it. And I think I'm hoping that this audit will provide the public with an opportunity to really get into some weeds about how PPS is being transformed and where we're headed, and will, go some way to restoring faith in PPS as a system that we would all like our own children to attend.
Just one thing I want to add that's been on my mind this evening since earlier is that I want to make clear that we understand the value of community partnerships too, and that we're not in this business or thinking that we can do all of this alone without our community partners. Just acknowledging that we are about a community and building community, and we'll continue to really strengthen partnerships that we have. It's important to us and to our kids.
So I want to just close by, I think, as noted, the 32 pages, we have a very comprehensive audit, and I think, audit response, I think part of that is just the amount of work that has occurred over the last year and a half on a whole host of areas, both at the staff level, at the board level. And I'm going to just note that I'm disappointed that we actually had to put that in our response, and that it was not acknowledged by the Secretary of State's Audit Division, even though that information was provided to them. I think we were told early on this would not be a gotcha audit, it wasn't for political purposes. And when I read the tone and the description of PPS, this isn't the PPS that I think exists today. It's I think it's a backwards look at the district and does not acknowledge, and I want to just call out to staff about who have done really, really hard work, and board members. We've, whether it was opening the middle schools or sort of giving up our summers to be able to hire the superintendent in 42 days, there was a lot of hard work that was done, and I feel like I don't feel like it's true, the audit does not acknowledge that, and I think it in some ways will provide a misleading perception of what has happened and the current state of the district. And again, I think if you're a parent in this district, or someone who has sort of been watching what's happening at the district, that it would be hard not to acknowledge that very significant work has happened over the last year and a half, and we're proud of that. We're going to embrace the recommendations for increased accountability and transparency, because we've always welcomed that, but it should be noted that it's disappointing that this has become more of a political sort of weapon against the district in some ways than an actual tool designed to help us get better.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Director Brim Edwards that the audit findings are old news in a lot of way, and it's disappointing that I don't want to get into a defensive posture here, because it's not like that old news wasn't true. It's just the failure of the audit to recognize what we are doing and have been doing. And that's what we're going to do. We've been doing it. That's what we're going to do anyway, because we're making this district better day by day for our kids. So, yeah, I don't want to be too defensive about this, but I understand how disappointing it is at the same time.
Anybody else?
I do think on that point, though, students, parents, teachers, families, people who are engaging with our district, day-to-day community partners see it. People who have anything to do with PPS do see that that's moving, and that's what matters, because that's who we're serving.
Yeah, so just as an example of that, the work around sort of middle grades equity warrants a passing reference, and we all know how much time that was spent by not only by the board on that topic over months last year, but the staff work that was involved in that, the financial commitment from the district to spend $20 million on both capital and operational improvements, 1,000 students from nine schools. It was a huge lift, and I say it's warrants only a passing sort of side reference of the work. And I think, Director Constam, to your point, those students at those schools and their families know it's different, but it's just unfortunate that that's not recognized or was not recognized fully by the audit team.
So tomorrow morning, things will be posted, including the PPS response, and we encourage everyone to read it. I think it will be illuminating work, an illuminating document for everybody. Okay, thank you. The next item, first reading policy rescissions. And we will now have a first reading of several policy rescissions, and I'd like to ask Director Brim-Edwards to introduce them.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So the Board Policy and Governance Committee has reviewed these recommended rescissions, and we're recommending them to the full board for a first reading. And assuming after our first reading, there'll be a 21-day comment period and then board consideration. As board members know, we are in the process of reviewing all our existing policies and administrative directives to make sure that our policies are updated and that relevant information is more easily accessible to users. So the first readings we're having this evening is Educators Council, which is policy 5.40.030. This policy has no content in it, so there's no need to have it. Next, we have professional compensation, which is policy 5.50.010. This policy also has no content in it, it's just a shell. Then we have professional growth incentive, which is policy 5.50.043. Again, this is another policy that has no content, it's just a shell. Then we have the maternity and paternity leave, which is policy 5.50.065. Leaves are governed by state and federal law and the relevant collective bargaining agreements. This policy is outdated and not needed. And then finally is teachers promotion, which is policy 5.60.011. This is another shell policy with no content in it. So these are all policies that came out of the committee with a recommendation for a first reading. They'll be posted if people want to comment on the policies that have no content. You can, and 21 days, the next board meeting after 21 days, if we don't have any significant reason not to move forward, we'll have a vote on final adoption. So those are the policy rescissions coming out of the committee. In addition, we have spent a fair amount of time on a policy relating to off-campus activities. And this was a policy that the committee has been looking at for basically two reasons. One, we had a recommendation from the Mitch Whitehurst report that this was a policy that needed to be updated. But in addition, there have been some longstanding concerns from members of the parent community about sort of equity and how the district approaches off-campus activities, and that could be anything from a field trip to an overseas trip or a week in Washington D.C. And so we did have a first reading of that policy about 6 weeks ago, and it's been open for public comment. We have received public comment. It's still in the committee, and we do have an amendment that we will be tonight first reading so that we can start the public comment period, because it's a substantive change to our current sort of off-campus field trip policy. Do you want me to go ahead and read it? So the amendment, which we'll be posting and it'll be available for comment, is off-campus activities of more than 5 days during planned school days on the board-approved school year calendar shall not be authorized, despite planning for continuity of curriculum. Off-campus activities that create excessive student and/or teacher absences do not fully meet board-approved educational objectives and planned instructional days. So this is an issue that has been the subject of past complaints from parents to the district, and so this amendment would be added to the revised policy that's currently in committee. And I don't know if anybody on the committee, do you want to speak to it, or would you?
When is this proposed amendment supposed to take place? Supposed to be implemented as of when?
So we have, I guess I'll just provide background. So this Thursday, we have a policy and governance committee meeting. We will have this posted for public comment. The conversation and the discussion in the committee has been that this would be applicable to the following school year.
1920.
So it would not, so for any current, activities, they would go ahead. I mean, the assumption is that they're sort of in flight under the current rules, and then it would not be fair to change the rules this year, but that a clean break would be at the start of next year. And that's assuming we have a process, and there may be people from the community who may want to comment on it, or we may further modify it.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What are the unintended consequences of, for example, the group that was here earlier, looking at a competition that would be a really great opportunity for some students. They may not have that opportunity to travel otherwise. Would we be then putting up barriers to our students being able to partake in some really interesting and, I think, learning activities?
So I think
because it shall not, I mean, it doesn't give a lot of room.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that this is for school year activities, and that there are a variety of things that happen not during the school year or during spring break, but to capture some of the discussion that's occurred is that in some of the programs, when you have large numbers of students out of the school, one of the results is a negative impact on students who are still in back at the school. There's not the continuity of curriculum. They don't have they have substitute teachers, and things kind of grind to the halt until everybody comes back.
I'm just concerned about having a blanket policy. For example, like you mentioned, spring term, so some competitions or opportunities might be over that, but nobody has a consistent spring term across the country. So
I think it just pertains to language immersion programs for 5 days during the school year. I don't know.
I don't
don't
see that language here, though, so
No,
it's
but
a
I mean, I
blanket
think
policy.
So do
Those
do
are
we
the
have-
only ones now that have a 5-day or more off-campus activities. I mean, who knows?
So I would like to see a list of those schools and trips that are occurring this year, and some of them have a long tradition. And certainly would want to have some direct notification to those schools, like now, if this is on the table.
To comment on the policy?
Yeah, and I think we should proceed carefully and thoughtfully.
I'm gonna agree with that too, because also I'm thinking if this is, I'm gonna agree with that point because it straight up says, shall not be authorized, but could this mean consecutive days? Is this 5 days in a row? You know what I mean? And so
Also doesn't say whether it's school days
whether
or.
it's school days or if it's just
Planned during
Planned school days.
Oh, planned school days. Okay.
It says 5
But
days during. It doesn't say
you
how
know,
many
with
days.
this amendment, I can already think of quite a few trips that go on at Cleveland that might already be affected by this, and with the outside companies that teachers use, I don't even think those companies would change their plan. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I mean, it's worth noting that we're talking about district-sponsored activities. We're not talking about activities that would be organized outside, that are not sponsored by the district itself.
But is that still is that still under just student and teacher absences in general? Because that's
Well, I would argue, in particular, if you're talking about a program that is not district-sponsored, and it is an enrichment program, I don't think it is optimal for the students, either the students participating or the ones who are left behind, to have teachers and a large number of students gone for more than a week of school. I mean, if we're talking about, a 2-week program, a 3-week program during the regular school year, that's a huge chunk of time. And activities can be planned around spring break, winter break, summer. They shouldn't, not everything has to happen during the school year.
Well, I'm not even worried about 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I'm worried about maybe even just 6 days or 7 days. There's countless trips that I can already think of that even go to Washington D.C. for government trips that might be just 6 days.
Well, we're talking about weekdays. I mean, when you add weekends on either side, you're talking about 9 days. We're talking
Although
about
the language
5
here is
school
not clear,
days.
needs to be clarified.
Yeah. That's more what I.
It says planned school days, that's pretty.
No, it says
clear.
more than 5 days during planned school days, so that could be within the school calendar, but not necessarily school days. Anyway,
Okay,
we need to tighten it up.
We can fix that in the committee.
Yeah.
And also, I think Roseanne already took note of an inventory of things planned this year that exceed that amount of time during the school year, which is just a handful of immersion trips.
And it should be noted that there's also other immersion programs that don't take staff out of the school at all.
Right, but it doesn't, I think we just have to be really careful with the language, and I don't want to be too restrictive, because it sounds like it might be more on a case-by-case basis.
I think it's worth noting that the public comment at the beginning of the meeting was not around them being out of class, but that we have an administrative directive that relates to risk.
Oh, no, I understand that. I'm not trying to confound the two, but I am saying I still think that we need to be careful, because those unintended consequences of what might we miss if we have too restrictive of a rule. I think there should be some guidelines.
So these are the issues that I know directors will continue to talk about, that tries to answer a dilemma that lots of school districts are facing. I just had a call from a colleague in another state because these kinds of issues are resulting in formal uniform complaints, meaning what do we deem to be part of the educational program and therefore students have equitable access to, and what is a supplemental or an optional enrichment that's not school or district sponsored. Well, if it's a school day and teachers are on the payroll and they're out, then by nature that's a district-sponsored activity. So I think it's important to how are excursions, if they're off campus, an essential part of the learning that we want to encourage in PPS, and what is the right sort of margin for permissive activity in those areas, and how are we sensitive to some unintended consequences about who can and who can't participate, whether it's for economics or religious or documentation or any slew of reasons why a student might not be able to participate in something we say is essential.
Yeah, and in the past, we've heard about the left behind that weren't part of that program, but how it affected with a substantial number of teachers away on the trip. And how that disrupted that. So I think I'm glad we're taking this on and looking at it. I think there's some good reasons to look at it. I want to make sure that we get good communication out.
Very good point.
And that it's so that we're not surprising anybody.
As soon as we have consensus and clarity, then we'll be sure to do that.
So yeah, some clarity around what specifically do we mean as a district authorized trip would be good.
Right.
So, let's talk a little bit about the process. So we have a meeting this Thursday where this will be introduced. So tonight we're having the formal first reading. We probably will have 2 Policy and Governance Committee meetings during the time period before this comes back to the board. We probably would incorporate it into the revised policy that's already had a first reading, and then bring the whole thing, the whole policy back for a final second reading and approval. What I would suggest is that people take a look at this. If you're on the committee, obviously come to the committee ready to have a discussion. If you're not on the committee, you're more than welcome to participate in the discussion, to make suggestions. What I would suggest we not do is wait till we bring the amended policy back to the board for second reading and then be making edits at the board table. I think we have plenty of time to try and get it right, so let's try and do the work. Because if we do it at the board table at last minute, I think sometimes we might have an unintended consequence. And then people might not have an opportunity to comment on sort of the last minute change. So I really recommend people,
well,
pressure test it now.
This might need a third reading. And that's, I'm perfectly okay with that if it bounces back and forth because I think realistically the public coming to a committee meeting during the day versus testifying the board at night, there's a big difference between that and that kind of availability for a lot of people. So I think we need to be sensitive to that.
So we will have 2 committee meetings, and we could think about how to structure it. I guess I would be concerned about having a third reading because we don't do that for other things. So let's think about ways in which we can provide opportunities for people who want to comment on it.
Right, but we didn't need to do a third reading for the cash management policy, okay? This one is going to attract a lot of attention, and that's a good thing, and we want to make sure that people get that we're informed, and that people have a chance to weigh in, and so that might, if not a third reading, at least have some kind of venue whether it's a formal board meeting or not.
We've had other policies over the last 18 months that were pretty high visibility and a lot of people were interested in, and we got a fair number of comments through emails, through phone calls. There are lots of ways that people can indicate their concerns or ask questions. So I mean that's why we have the 21-day comment period.
And just to build on that, I think there's two really significant policies we had was the complaint policy and the public records policy, which were 6 or 7 month processes. But I would say that most people who provided public comment, the committee had a discussion about it, and in many cases, it informed the final outcome. Now, at some point, people are going to be yes or no, but when people had good suggestions, when they emailed it, the comments in, or communicated in some other way, I think we always had a time period during the committee's deliberation that we discussed what public comment we'd received and whether there was an inclination on the part of the committee to include that feedback.
And the 21-day is the minimum. It doesn't mean on day 22, we're done. If we continue to get commentary, I mean, we had policy discussions 6, 7, 8 months.
Well, let's not try and repeat that record.
Well,
I've got to ask my fun question though. So with those comments that were received, were those mainly parents and adults from that comment period? So I mean, I guess one thing I'm thinking of is this specific amendment. And I would send this. I mean, me personally, I would send this straight to schools to have administrators and students look over, because I mean, parents' voice is extremely important as well. But this is something that's going to be directly affecting students and their trips and like their plans. So I just want to be mindful of that because I don't think that happened.
So I think we'll hear from people, and yes, we will communicate it. I also think we need to be mindful of the people we don't hear from.
Nick, can you help facilitate that?
Yeah,
through
no,
your
I mean,
student council? That would be
yeah,
great.
to work towards getting this out, that would be, yeah, definitely. So,
Just for a point of reference, and I think part of our conversation that we had in the committee, because we have spent a significant amount of time talking about this concept, is that the vast majority of students don't have passports. So, for example, any trip out of the country by nature excludes it, and most of these trips, there's a database you can look at, and you look at the cost, and we likely have students who aren't participating because of the cost of the trip. And so again, I think it's important to listen to students who might be impacted, but also to recognize that we may not hear from those students who are impacted as well in a negative way by the current policy.
So isn't that a separate part of what you're suggesting for an amended policy?
Well, the policy does also have a students can't be prevented from participating because of a financial cost.
And it also has pieces about administrators. But I mean, prior to this amendment, administrators leave out of the building and addresses other aspects of it more directly.
So it looks like it's going to be a great discussion. Nick, anything you can do to be helpful, but we'll want to circulate it broadly and welcome impact. I think our work always gets better by hearing from a diverse set of individuals. Okay, great. Thank you. So, board members, if you have any issues with any of the first readings we had, please let me know or let the committee know, and we'll have a discussion at our next committee meeting.
I should probably read this. The proposed policy rescissions will be posted on the board website, and the public comment period is 21 days, with the last date of comment being January 29, 2019. The board will hold a second reading of the policy rescissions at their January 29th meeting. Okay, the next set of policies will be a second reading. We have 3 policies that had a first reading on December 11th, 2018. The policies have been posted for public comment since that time. The board is now ready to vote on the amended policies. Again, I'd like to ask Director Brim Edwards to provide an overview of each amended policy, and then we'll vote on each policy separately.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So the first policy we have before us is we're going to be amending the cash management policy, which is 8.20.010. And it's quite a lengthy policy that's 13 pages. We're making one small change, which is we're currently, under the current policy, we have to approve the policy every year, which is not what we do with any other policy. So there's 2 changes that have been first read, which is we're striking the requirement that every year the board has to approve this. That's on page 13. And then we are adding language that the cash management report shall be provided to the board on a quarterly basis. And now that we have a full finance team, we know that's possible. So very small changes, and we received no public comment on this policy, and it was recommended out of the committee on a unanimous vote. Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
Second?
Director Esparza-Brown moves. Director Brim Edwards seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 5786. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay, any board discussion? Okay, the board will now vote on Resolution 5786. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Representative Paisler?
Yes.
Resolution 5786 is approved by a vote of 7-1, with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Okay.
Next policy?
The board will now consider, let me put it on the table.
Okay.
Board will now consider Resolution number 5787, Amendment of Reimbursement of Expenses, Board of Directors Policy 1.40.080. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Director Bailey moves. Director Constam seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 5787. Would you like to explain what the resolution is?
Sure. So this is another policy amendment that came out of the Policy and Governance Committee on a unanimous vote, unanimous recommendations, has first reading. We did not receive any public comment on it. And so the original revisions that we made are still in place. Essentially, this is a policy that speaks to reimbursements. There were 2 methods provided for reimbursement expenses for the Board of Directors. When we were going through our budget process last year, we flagged that we needed to make a change so that we're in compliance with state law. So we're, what the rescissions do are actually require that the reimbursement option is by reimbursement of actual expenses. So it's a technical fix so that we're in compliance.
Okay. Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
No.
Is there any board discussion? Okay, the board will now vote on Resolution 5787. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Student Representative Paisler?
Yes.
Resolution 5787 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Representative Paisler voting yes.
I have a question which I should have raised before, which is the timeline for implementation is retroactive
back to July of 2018, which obviously isn't practicable in terms of reimbursable expenses. So what is
That's
the
going to
plan with
be
that?
addressed from an operational standpoint. I think there was a message that was sent to the board members about that, so.
Not specific, anyway.
So I'll send you the communication, but it's a good point to raise, and we'll share with you what we sent out.
We didn't receive anything. Yeah. We just need to figure it out.
Okay. The board will now consider resolution number 5788, amendment of Board of Education Policy 1.20.010 and Student Representative Duties Policy 1.20.012. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second? Director Anthony moves, Director Rosen seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 5788. Would you like to explain the?
Yes, so this was another, I would describe it as a technical fix and some compliance-related changes that we have two policies, and effectively what we've done is taken the student representative duties from the Board of Directors policy and put them in the student representative duties policy. And this is really a cleanup. And I want to acknowledge that there was significant discussion with our previous student rep, Moses Tran, and then with our current student rep, also an interest in making changes to this policy and bringing them forward to the board for consideration. And by just amending this policy for these cleanups does not at all preclude, in fact, we'll be anticipating that further changes will be coming, but this is a sort of technical compliance cleanup. So you should have a fresh slate for your work ahead. And again, this came out of the committee unanimously. There's been no public comment, and we recommend the board's final approval.
Ms. Houston, is there any public comment?
Yes, we have one, Steve Buell.
Steve Buell. It'd be nice to have just a little comment before I make the comment about this thing. It'd be nice to have children-driven school district instead of data-driven school district. There's things you have to do to put those two things together. I don't see it happening the way that we're going. While you're all patting yourself on the back, please keep in mind that you've gone way backwards on some very important initiatives that were the board before you that you have dumped, which were very child-oriented, and I'm not sure your transparency has gotten any better. I haven't seen that. I'm still struggling trying to just
Excuse
talk
me,
to
are
people.
you speaking to this resolution?
Yes, I am, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. This resolution, well, is not just a little cleanup. This changes the status of the student representative. The student representative has always been seen as a equal member with the board, except in two areas. Area one is he's only allowed, or she's only allowed, to come to executive sessions with the approval of the board. And two is that he or she cannot vote. And in the original policy, it says every other thing that a board member has, he or she has that power. Now, basically what you've done, you've taken that away. Now, if I was a student rep, I'd be screaming bloody murder here, because basically what you've done is taken away student voice, because in this case, the student voice is there. It's solid as a rock. The new policy changes makes him a kind of like he's shadowing the school board, not an actual member of the school board. Now, a couple weeks ago, this board took a look at student voice and said, we don't really want to do student voice. And you just did it again tonight, where they asked, can you take care of this, Nick? Which was a good question. But there was no answer. There was no, yes, we'll take this out. and actually go to the schools and the kids in the schools and let them, as your student rep suggested. So this is a real destructive thing for student voice. I'm a big proponent of student voice. I think it's critical to listen to your students in your school system, and this goes the exact opposite direction. I suggest everybody vote no, and you go back to the drawing board, keep the beginning things in there, and then Mr. Paisler himself goes, wait a minute, this is not working for me. This is wrong. You guys have a nice evening. Thank you.
I think I do anticipate with the work that the student representative is doing with the superintendent and the hiring of a new liaison within the district to support a much stronger infrastructure for bringing student voice forward. I do anticipate probably substantial changes to this policy. And Nick, before you leave, and one of the things, that when we had the opportunity to meet with a panel of students at the Council of Great City Schools, we had a really great discussion about whether or not student representatives should be full voting members. And there are some districts that have that precedent, and there's still some exceptions around labor agreements and personnel matters and all that, but that was something that really progressive school districts are doing. So I look forward to seeing some substantive new ideas coming forward from both of you on this whole area, because I think it's ripe for a lot of change. In my experience on the board, we have not done a good job of honoring student voice and having structures and mechanisms for integrating kids into our decision-making process. And I think we just saw that with the SRO issue, and we're getting better all the time. But just like everything else that we're working on, we need systems in place so that it's not just an ad hoc occurrence.
So we recognize that early on, and one part of our district reorganization is, as you know, we created a new department for student support services, and we were getting ready to launch sort of one wing of that, and that was to be deliberate about having central capacity to promote, support student leadership and student engagement, student voice. And I know that Chief Martinick has been working with our student rep Paisler so that our students are actually helping as a part of the selection process in being clear about what kind of person can really help fill that role to support student leadership activity across all of our high schools. Now, this team will be focused not just on student government and leadership, but also supporting student leadership activities like with our Black student unions, our METCHA groups, and other requests and solicitations from school at the school level for central office support in those areas. And so PPS hasn't been organized that way in the past, and so we wanted to make sure and create a capacity that you might find in some of the large urban districts. And so stay tuned for, I know, a couple personnel that will be going up for recommended hire to help lead that effort. I had one comment about the language or the text here specifically, and I just wanted to check with Mr. Paisler. It references the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, SuperSAC, and I know that our students, wanted to have ownership over the nomenclature of that group, like a district level student leadership council, and I just wanted to double check how you wanted the language to be reflected there.
Yeah, so we have so far changed the name of the council to the District Student Council. So that's how we're going to be moving forward. And so, I think backing up on that, those changes are what I'm looking for. There's lots of changes and I think additions to come through this school year that I hopefully will work on and get done before my term is up. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And so I think, as long as moving forward, as long as this, I agree with this cleanup, because I think this policies have been messy over the past couple of years and nothing's really been done. So I agree that if the cleanup is necessary and that it makes things more clear for the student representative currently, that makes sense, but that doesn't mean I'm leaving it here. So there will be work done, and my goal is to put all of our new edited items and additions into this, especially to work with the new student support position for next year. So, yeah.
Great. Well, after we modify that this evening, if you have a package of amendments, let's bring them to the Policy and Governance Committee and we can consider them. Maybe it's worth clarifying that these this recommended cleanup was part of a pretty extensive review of the policies done by outside counsel, and was recommended as sort of a technical change and was not meant at all as a diminishment of the student representative's voice in this process. And we welcome your suggestions and bringing forth changes to the policy.
So if I could ask you a question straight up, and it's in reference to what Mr. Buell said. If you look at what's in the crossed out here, is the first two sentences state directly what the responsibilities are. And the new language starts off with the student rep is expected to learn about the board by, and then list a bunch of activities. And I think and I see nodding, I think that's what Mr. Buell is talking about in terms of whether intended or not.
I think there's a little bit of nuance in the original recommendations from outside counsel that had to do with, and Liz, you could help me out here, that had to do with liability and the way that the student reps' responsibilities were characterized. I know those were some of the original concerns.
They were done and made in the summer of 2017, and they were really focused on technical compliance. I don't know that the language that you identified, Director Bailey, was really at the heart of those concerns. Again, I think trying to create not only a technically compliant structure, but also making sense of these two policies and having content about the student representative in the student representative policy and the elected board in the other policy was also part of the intent to make it clearer. So you had technical compliance and you had clarity. So those sentences that you just read, I think were more subsumed in the intent to clarify, not the technical fix, if that's helpful. You're giving me a look like it wasn't, so let me know.
Yeah, I mean, just as it reads, though, it's you're an apprentice, or an intern in that sense.
Well,
and is that that's what the language would directly state? Is that what we want to? Am I missing something here in terms of what you were just saying?
Well, I mean, the cleanup, from what I remember, is to clarify that the student representative isn't a board member. Am I correct? That was part of the cleanup, was to clarify that it's a representative.
Your rights and
not
responsibilities are different.
Yes, exactly. Okay, right. So to clarify that, okay.
So maybe also, Director Bailey, I'm just looking, that it's a super long paragraph with lots of semicolons. But it does say that it's talking about the duties, representing the views of students on matters of concern to students. It also has being an articulate voice to the public on matters of concerns to students. So I think you still, even though this doesn't lead with it, it is one of the many clauses listed in that very long paragraph.
I'm looking at the main sentence, which is the student representative is expected to learn about the board. And that's
Sounds like an outsider.
That to me feels like a pat on the head.
I think I would concur with Director Bailey, because I think in the attempt to offer clarification, when you read the paragraph as is, and it wouldn't take a lot to sort of create more affirmative language besides may not, will not, can't, versus starting off with our student representative plays an important role in amplifying student voice to elected policymakers of the, and then elaborate on what those parameters are, I think has a different tone, is I think what we're getting at.
Yeah.
So can I offer a potential path forward? maybe we table this, or maybe we send it back to the committee, that we have a meeting on Thursday. We can capture I think what we think is the intent, but maybe not artfully expressed, and then bring it back for a second reading. Does that work?
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, I think time-wise, and just for this section, I think that would be a good idea. Because I think there's a little more, I think.
Yeah, we don't need to
clarity.
wordsmith it here. I mean, we have a meeting
Yeah.
and we can, I don't think there's any disagreement on the intent. It's just not
Captured.
artfully worded, so we can correct that. We can then send it back out, and unless Ms. Large tells us differently, we probably can then just have another second reading on the language. This doesn't sound like we're going to be changing substantively the intent, rather just how it's expressed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and with my plan this year too, I mean, I don't think this isn't the first time, this isn't the only time this policy is going to be adjusted. So, I mean, there will be more to come. So, with that in mind, there will be more time to go through this. So,
And I think, you and I have talked about this
Yeah.
a fair bit.
just got to get through finals week. Just got to get through finals.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, I will work on this in 2 weeks, but.
And my expectation is that your suggestions for change are going to be very substantive.
Yeah.
And significant.
Mm-hmm.
In the direction of not only clarifying the student role, but actually enhancing it.
No, yeah, I mean, I think events, budgets involved, the position involved, I think there's going to be a lot more coming to this, as well as I think we can, craft it a little bit more to be student voiced, boom, so, I agree. Okay, follow up with that.
Okay.
So we have a motion, there's a motion on the table, though?
Is there?
And so, Ms. Large, can we amend that motion to send it to the Policy and Governance Committee? So I would.
Or do we,
Um,
we need a motion to table? Is that the proper?
I think you could just table.
Or can we just re-refer it to committee?
Okay. Do we need, I think I need some legal guidance here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How about I move to table the motion?
Do we have to table the entire?
Or we could just,
Or just-
or
Can
we
we
could
just
just
send it
vote
back
it, we could just vote it down and you come back.
I think either path will work. I think it's clear what the board is trying to do, so we can pick one path or the other. But there's, the point of our governance is to make clear on the decisions we're making, and I think the intent is clear procedurally. We can withdraw the motion. You
And
can,
that would probably be the cleanest.
Yeah, I don't think we want to vote it down or table.
Okay, right. Okay, so do we
all
need
of the
to
above.
vote to withdraw? Or can we,
no, I think the
Whoever made
director
the
who made
motion.
the motion can.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Director?
I did.
Anthony, right. So,
So I withdraw the motion.
okay,
There we go.
all right. Resolution 5788 is withdrawn and will be reconsidered at the Policy and Governance Committee. Okay. Okay, the next item is board leadership vote. Per board policy, leadership roles are voted upon twice annually. At this time, I will ask for nominations for chair and vice chair. Let's take nominations for chair. Do we have any nominations?
I nominate Rita Moore.
Second.
Do we have any other nominations? Okay, do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Are we going to have just a vote on that, or discussion and then vote?
Discussion and vote. Okay, let's, do we have any discussion on, so resolution number 5789, election of board chairperson, with Director Moore nominated for chair. Do I have a motion and a second? Okay.
Bailey and Anthony.
Director Bailey moved, Director Anthony seconds the motion to adopt resolution number 5789. Is there any board discussion?
So, yes, I am going to be supportive. I just want to share a concern I have that we retain our sense of urgency and focus on our core responsibilities of the board. I'm concerned that we're halfway through our the school year and we have not yet completed the goals for the superintendent. We have a facilitated discussion with the Pioneer community that's about 6 months overdue. And I'm also concerned about a host of things that we're sort of in driving with great urgency, and we have not yet completed or put it on our agenda. And one of those would be the completion or the continuation of the middle school work we haven't had on our agenda for the last 6 months. So I guess I would, with my vote, ask that we really keep focused on what we need to accomplish as our core role as the board and the things that we need to accomplish for our students. The second thing would be also that there be frequent, regular conversations with board colleagues about our work, so that we have open lines of communications as we move into the second half of the year.
I would like to say I'm going to be supportive of Chair Moore to continue in the role, and I'd just like to say that with regard to our activities and our agendas, what we have arrived at in the last 6 months, which is very different from the preceding year, is a joint work plan with the senior staff that clearly prioritizes all of our activities. And there is a lot of work to be done, as we all know, and there are no priorities unless we really strategize about what we're capable of delivering, what the board's appropriate role is, and what is reasonable to ask and to jointly plan with staff. And so as far as that really should be our guiding light. And I think we still need one more iteration of codifying exactly what that work plan is and how we're going to attach it to metrics and how we're going to attach it to our board calendars. But we pretty much completed the unified work plan that tells us where we're going to prioritize our efforts, and that was work that was collectively done. So for me, that is really energizing because we're not scratching our heads thinking, what are we going to respond to next, or what's coming out of the blue. We've really said, this is the constellation of pressing issues. This is how we're going to go about addressing them, and we're all on board, or to the extent that we might not be. We've had really robust discussions about it, and we've prioritized together. So I just want to reinforce that is and should be our guiding light, and in the coming year, or let's say in the coming 6 months, I want to see that very pragmatically applied to our meeting agendas. I think that's the next step.
My primary point was that we have work that's the board's work that needs to be scheduled, and the staff has nothing to do with the superintendent's goals, and we need to do that because that's one of our primary responsibilities, and it's just disappointing that we're at this stage in the year and we don't have that completed.
I appreciate what you're saying, and when I look at my calendar, I don't know, something else would have been shoved off. I mean, we've been working a lot, so just leave it there. Let's call the question.
Okay. The board will now vote on resolution number 5789. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Student Representative Paisler?
Yes.
Resolution number 5789 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Can I ask a Ms. Lodge question? So we have the posted resolution number 5789 was for both a chair vote and a vice chair.
Oh, one number.
One number.
What's posted is a second resolution, 5790, for the vice chair.
Okay.
I'm looking at the site.
Okay. We'll now consider resolution number 5790, election of vice chair.
I nominate Director Esparza Brown.
Second.
Okay, Director Brim Edwards nominates Director Esparza Brown and Director Anthony, Director Bailey, the other one. Director Bailey seconds. Is there any board discussion? Okay, the board will now vote on resolution number 5790. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Student Representative Paisler?
Yes.
Resolution number 5790 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Okay. Thank you. I guess we should say something. Just move on to the next thing. I want to thank everybody for the vote of confidence. There's, as everyone has said, there's a great deal of work to be done, and the work is hugely important for all of our students. So we can't lose sight of the real essence of the work, which is improving the way we deliver education that is appropriate and engaging and useful for students. And we're trying to, we're still in the stage of developing governance processes, and we have made some real progress, I think, in identifying the joint work between the board and the staff. And there's still pieces that need to be finalized, but I think it feels to me, at least, like we have a more solid footing in knowing who's doing what, when, and how. And I think it gives us a path forward to make real progress in the kind of transformation that we all want to have happen to PBS. So, did you want to say?
I do. So thank you, colleagues and friends, also for the vote of confidence. I'll continue. We have done a lot of work. I mean, we are exhausted. I think we can all look at our faces. But it's important work. There's been a lot of progress that's been made. I'll just reiterate that my areas of focus that I want to continue to really laser focus on are our community partnerships, closing that historic achievement gap or the resource gap, making sure that we're providing equitable opportunities, but we're doing that in community because we can't do it alone. Also looking at the progress of programs for kids with disabilities, special needs. And I'll continue to be really interested in our literacy work with the new dyslexia law that's coming down the pipe that will be enacted in September in the fall. Looking at how we can better identify and serve kids that struggle with literacy, with reading, which we know is about 20% of our population. So kind of those are my areas of focus that I will continue to bring a lot of energy to, as well as everything else on our work plan. So thank you. Looking forward to a productive next 6 months.
Okay, next item is the business agenda. The board will now vote on the remaining items in its business agenda, having already voted on resolutions 5786 through 5790. Ms. Hewson, are there any changes to the business agenda?
Yes, as mentioned earlier in the meeting, on page 3 of the business agenda, resolution 5785, the Black Parent Initiative contract has been pulled.
Can I ask, I wasn't aware of that until right before the meeting, how that happened or who pulled it, and more information about it, because I think,
And also, Mr. Posey referenced a series of questions which the board has not seen.
seeing the questions or the answers?
The questions, all the questions and the answers.
So they were questions generated by the board?
I'm asking the same question.
Okay. I think it was Dr. Martin.
So there was an email that was sent with some of the answers. And is there a normal practice when the contracts are sent out to board members, that board members have a chance to review them, ask questions, and I think that's what happened. It should be noted in the audit that all direct negotiation contracts or contracts for services to students, that the recommendation is that the board provide oversight and review them.
There were a number of questions that were asked by a number of people. And so I spoke with the interim executive director yesterday, got the questions answered that I had, excuse me, that I had been asked of. After I sent that out, there were additional questions that were asked, and based on discussion through either text, email, or phone calls from a variety of people, including legal counsel, we made a decision to pull the BPI contract. I did call Mr. Posey at that time, and I sent an email to all of you that I was pulling the contract at that time, and spoke with Mr. Posey. I told him that there were a number of other questions, and so told him that I would email him those additional questions, which I did this afternoon, and then asked to set up a time to meet with him and with Iris Bell, the interim executive director, in order to go through more of those, do more of our due diligence in order to provide the board with additional information so that you can make a decision.
I guess I'm concerned about process, so how long, we've had the business agenda in our packet now for a while. I'm just concerned about holding up, just, kind of financial issues with some of our community partners, and maybe because we've looked at our packets late and haven't asked the questions in a timely manner. I don't know, I'm just feeling really bothered. I know it is a partner that has experienced a lot of turmoil, and I think they're really working hard to rebuild. And our students benefit from services. I'm just concerned about putting them in a bad position by having to wait.
So I'll address some of this. So almost a year ago, I don't remember the exact date. So there were a number of issues that were raised. One of them was that there was not a board, a governing board, for almost 9 months, which is out of compliance with the law, which is a significant issue. And I had asked some questions a long time ago that were not answered. And then I believe we got we got the contract, and then we got the overview memo on Friday afternoon, and further questions were asked. I asked a series of questions, and they weren't all answered. I don't know what other questions were asked, but personally, I do think one of the issues that the Secretary of State's audit raised, they asked the question about what our process for oversight, and we provided a description. I think we've made a lot of progress on how we provide transparency for our contracting. for those contracts that have a student-focused outcome, there was a specific recommendation that we make sure that that the board, not just staff, provide adequate review. So I asked a number of questions about governance. If you might recall the story, there was also an issue with staff, and the question whether there had been training related to harassment and conduct staff, so that we knew that our partners were starting out with the training, both in terms of governance and appropriate staffing training, that they would have had that, and we would feel confident that an organization that has interaction with our students and families, that we felt comfortable that they had met those standards. And at least from my standpoint, that's, and it wasn't the content of what they're offering. I think they offer a valuable curriculum, but I also think it was an organization that had a very significant issue that I think we need to transparently address it. And what we looked at, what sort of remediation the organization took, and I think they've taken some,
Well,
but
I
it's
think
not.
there's a new board and a new interim CEO. I think they have taken steps.
New strategic plan.
I say that they were out of compliance with the law for 9 months, and we
Yes.
didn't know that. So.
Right. I think that's why those, again, it has been reconstituted. I agree that oversight is crucial. But I'm not sure how to move ahead and really help support some of our organizations when they're going through their own trauma, and then how that trauma impacts their community. So.
I mean,
Can I
to
ask
me,
you-
the bottom line is the justification for the value of the services in the first place. And what are our schools saying in terms of requesting these school-based services? And what is our chief's estimation of the value of continuing contracting with an organization? Is this bringing value to our students? Is it meeting have we set clear goals and metrics? And that's the recommendation that we ask for from our chief, in this case, you.
Yes. I think this is a complicated matter. As I have taken on the community partnership responsibility just over the past 4 weeks, it might be 5 weeks with the Christmas break, there are contracts that I have started looking at and getting into the process of reviewing contracts. I agree with the Secretary of State's recommendation that we have had some issues with monitoring our contracts and doing due diligence and having a clear process. Now that I am starting to oversee those contracts, I am going to be meeting with our contracts person, Emily Courtnage, in addition to Claire and a number of other people, in order for us to get a clear process down so that we can do our due diligence while at the same time providing needed services for our students with our community partners who are vital to the success and support of our students and families. I believe that after I have a meeting with Mr. Posey and Iris, that I will be able to provide you with information that will hopefully support the decision that we need to move forward with a BPI contract. That is my hope. I also want to do it in a timely manner, because I don't believe that giving you a cover letter 2 days before the board meeting is timely. And so I need to fix our processes with our community partnership area, our contracts, and so there's a lot of work to do in that area. And so I'm not going to provide excuses or anything like that. I just believe that that I need to do these things, and I will provide you with a report. Oh, and there's Claire.
So in fairness to Chief Martinick here, because this is part of our ongoing reorganization, senior leadership shares the goal that the board has. We don't need an audit to tell us. We should be responsible public stewards, particularly when we contract with valued partners who we know have worked hard to solidify sort of their own operations. And there were a number of questions. Some came in a little bit late, but we want to have full confidence that your questions are answered and that we reviewed and we've had a chance to communicate with our partners so that when it appears on the agenda for vote that we can feel confident about it. It's also, and BPI is not the only organization right now where this is the exact same scenario. We're asking for an additional level of rationale and documentation, and it's merely a bridge for partners who are currently engaged in multi-year partnerships with the school system. That is separate from the fact that we really want to move towards having a very transparent RFP process. We need to tie the supports and interventions that specific school communities are requesting and matching those up, working with all of our, especially culturally specific organizations. So we're not looking to limit business. In fact, we want to be much more strategic about where we apply those partnerships because there's more than enough work for everyone. But this was an attempt to try to bring some second semester support to a few named schools. We just want to make sure that we're all good with the specifics. But the notion of having contractual decisions or recommendations not being made unilaterally in any one department is why I think what Deputy Sue Hertz came up to the panels to describe how we want to go about a multi-department panel to really make thoughtful decisions like that. And after an opportunity to check in with all of our partners around the kinds of services that they can provide in targeted ways.
Well, and I also just wanted to request from Chair Moore if we couldn't if we can get the questions resolved this week and then make an action item on our work session for next week.
Okay, I'd feel better about that. I mean, I think my concern is just process that, we make sure to get our questions answered so we're not holding up a contract where they might really be relying on our contract in order to continue to deliver the services. So I would appreciate that if we could get the logistics and the metrics and all taken care of, and then perhaps have a vote next week.
Well, we have an unusual period of time. We normally have a board meeting essentially every other week.
Right.
And we have an unusual period now where we're going to have 3 weeks intervening before the next. But we do have work sessions in those 3 weeks. We could certainly take some time and reconvene as a board, as a regular board meeting, and take a vote if we have all of the information we need.
When we do, but I think that's a good solution.
Just clarification. Because there's been mention of a number of different services, but this is for parent engagement at 3 schools. So
Yes.
it's not a student outcome directly as a metric, is that correct?
It is specifically for the 3 schools, and it's around
Okay.
parent engagement.
You're saying there's no students involved?
No,
I'm just. I think that the contract and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the contract states it's around parent engagement.
Then it's different from last year because last year's metrics there was a parent piece, but there was
also a student.
Also student pieces as well.
And what I want to do next week is talk about it because the timeline has been so shortened.
Yeah.
I really want to have a conversation to see what's going to be successful for BPI to do within a 5-month period of time.
Right. So one thing, just for the rest of the board, just in terms of contract process, in our discussion the other day with the Secretary of State, They're not providing us with a set protocol for how they expect us to review contracts. Certainly, there is an expectation that there be more board oversight over any contracts related to students or services to students, and that are direct negotiation. And I should note that, pardon? Really careful. That the contracts that they audited, it's important to note that about half of them were below the $150,000 threshold that is for board review. And as part of our dialogue with the auditors, they are recommending a more, that we outline what our specific process is so that it's transparent.
I think I can clarify this a little bit by what the staff would like to recommend to the board, is that we align more of an academic return on investment approach to our investments in these types of contracts. And in our budget process, we'll be bringing forward that whole framework and structure for this is like the next steps towards aligning resources to our strategic plan.
And this is something that we've been making a little bit of progress on, but asking for the last several years. And one of the key components there is for us to be able to compare like services and what the value really is. So that the templates are similar, the metrics are similar, so that we can really make choices around where we want to invest resources based on what they're doing for kids and families.
And I think another piece that we've asked about several times is looking at the performance measures on an annual basis, the annual and quarterly reporting, and doing an assessment on the effectiveness of the work with our partners and determining whether subsequent contracts need to be adjusted or changed or stay the same, but based on those metrics.
And
so you can
certainly-
see developmentally, we agree, we want to be student-centered and data-driven, and that requires performance metrics. And those indicators in some areas haven't existed historically in the organization. So we want to be equitable and fair in how we are gauging positive impact. Certainly there are many ways that our valued partners describe that, and we want to give assurance that regardless of community-based partner, for instance, that we can document clearly that their work is in fact playing a role in raising student outcomes.
And certainly the board has been clear to me as one of our financial leaders of the district that it's something that you brought up probably the first board meeting I attended, and I've gotten lots of feedback from this, and we are implementing a system working with our DISCO partners on the other side of the house. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to, we will return to this. You'll be getting us more information, and then when board members feel like we have enough information, then we'll take the opportunity to have a vote in some upcoming board session yet to be determined.
So what I want
work
to
session,
ensure for timeliness is that we have received several rounds of questions, and that by tomorrow that we receive any remaining questions so we can bring closure to the issue.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will send an email to everybody just outlining, again, the questions and answers that I have received so that you can review those one more time, ask any final questions so that when I have the chance to meet with BPI that we can go through and be complete. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Rita, Mr. Posey's trying to get your attention.
Very briefly.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you folk know that we've been under a tremendous amount of scrutiny. You're not the only funder or entity in our community that we've had to respond to relative to our condition. Just want to let you know that. We've had lawyers in, we've had a whole bunch of people scrutinize our organization. In my opinion, in many cases unfairly, based upon something that happened to an individual. Why should our kids be jeopardized based upon the action of one or two individuals? I just want to let you know we're responsible. We've gone back over and over this issue that we've had. And I think you're right. You all can't do it alone. You do need community partners. You do need the community to be on board. And we know the fundamental issue with our kids oftentimes is their parents. They are products of previous education board members. We're working with those parents. And I just want to suggest to you, the state has provided funding for us. Other organizations have provided for us. They've seen this material. Your folk, a month ago, I don't want to cast any aspersions on anybody, we've been in contact with Julia for a month. These questions have not just come up. If you all really had questions and concerns, talk to us. We're a small community. Everybody knows everybody. We're your family. Talk to us. That's all we asked.
Fair point.
So just to clarify, there's a staff role in contracting. There's a board role in contracting. They're related but different. And in order for the board to perform due diligence that people expect from us and demand of us, we need to have the information. And the information we got on Friday didn't answer all of the questions that we had. So this is it's an unfortunate circumstance that we're probably looking at a matter of a couple of days where we will probably be able to assemble more information. But right now, board members, we are responsible for being good stewards of public funds. We are under at least as much scrutiny as you have been. And that's probably going to get even more. So we have to do our job. And my expectation is that we'll be looking at this probably within, I would assume within the next 2 weeks, when we can assemble all of the information so that board member questions can be satisfied. So, okay. Is there any public comment on the business agenda?
No. I had that,
Did we?
the item that I flagged
Right.
just.
Did we move?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Director Anthony moves. Director Esparza Brown seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Is there any board discussion?
Yeah, I had a couple questions about the Prospects studio that contract that I sent earlier. So this is the contract, the phase 2 contract. The first phase was a no bid contract, and the second was by RFP. And we're adding an additional increment on to this, and just so everybody knows, I sent these questions earlier. So we're now at about $229,000 for the overall contract, and that will get us through to all the deliverables that were stated in the RFP. And then I had an additional set of questions that I had sent through regarding so 2 parts to this, other items that will be cumulative to the vision process, which was related to potential travel and how much that was, and then any other expenditures that would finish out the vision phase of the contract.
Sure. So, please identify yourself.
Joshua Garcia, Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships and leading this process. So I was able to respond to your email earlier this afternoon. We are looking to allocate about $10,000 for what we're calling learning journeys. These learning journeys will be taking place in three different ways. The first will be a trip to the Bay Area, the South Bay, the Peninsula, and San Francisco. This will take place over the course of a day and a half. We look to have about a dozen or so folks from our Guiding Coalition join us for that trip. The second trip that we are looking to embark on is here in the Pacific Northwest. We will be making our way up north to Vancouver and Seattle area, and we expect to have about 25 folks from the Guiding Coalition as we will be renting a school bus to make our way up there. And then the last way that we're going to be doing this is 100% participation of the Guiding Coalition to participate in a virtual learning journey. We will be providing videos and excerpts from different areas across the country that are showing innovative and transformational work for student outcomes and whatnot. So again, $10,000 for learning journeys. The other two major items in this project are the Guiding Coalition gatherings. As you know, there are 6 in total over the course of, obviously, last December, 1 in February, and 1 in March. We are looking at allocating, well, so far we've allocated about 30. We doubt we're going to use the 30,000. That is just there for now, and I'm happy to provide a more detailed budget item by end of week to the entire board, as I shared in the email. And the last piece, which is kicking into gear next week, is our community meetings. So thus far for the month of January, we have 25 scheduled community meetings, or about 25 community meetings. These are large tent gatherings with hundreds of folks, and we have small focus groups, as an example, with teen parents in our community. And again, that list will be made available to the public and to the board tomorrow. And so again, with the community meetings, we're looking again about 20,000 or so, and that is looking at purchasing meals for certain communities, like students, when we're engaging students after school or during lunch, and maybe want to do something outside of pizza or the lunch. So those are the items. And again, by end of week, I'm happy to provide a detailed budget that accounts all of this for the board to consume, and again, ask any questions.
Great, thank you for the information. And I was busy this afternoon, so I didn't.
Yeah, totally.
Late arriving emails, I don't often have a chance to review. So with all of that, you won't be coming back to the board with another contract extension for this.
I will not.
We should have a finished vision.
Yes.
And then I'm curious, Superintendent Guerrero, just the follow-on of the strategic plan, is that a separate RFP, or are we going to do that use internal capacity to build that out, which is sort of the next phase of the process?
It is going to be a combination. I think we had set aside some initial funds, and obviously this is going to build off the North Star that this visioning process articulates as a deliverable at the end, but also builds off of a lot of interim work plans that each chief has begun to develop for their department. So we're looking at a midsummer, as soon as this starts to come into focus, our vision, staff will come underneath that. And hopefully what we'll see is sort of a multi-year strategic plan that builds towards that aspiration. We did set aside resources for the strategic plan, so I don't know that we'll be requiring that level of resource in this fiscal year beyond some late spring, early summer activities. So that might roll over to support that kind of activity and ultimately publication of some communication collateral.
And I just want to note the community meetings. I've also sent an email to all of you, so you can start seeing an initial list of the committee meetings that we have scheduled.
Can I just also point out that the level of community meetings that we're now talking about, it represents an expansion of the scope of work from the original.
Yes. Happy to chat offline or.
I think that was the punchline, that there was a desire for more robust activity that the board really advocated for, which I think has been great. It's really helped to allow the kinds of experiences that we're trying to build in here. I'm excited about, being able to see what some very futuristic thinking is out there in areas like the role of technology moving forward. I think we're lining up, if I can reveal, a visit to the Apple World headquarters, some schools in Silicon Valley doing some fascinating things, a STEM-focused comprehensive middle school that's opened recently, on top of some trips here in the Northwest that are doing some interesting things that are all intended to just kind of provoke our thinking about what's possible. And we're talking about what could be, but some schools are actually doing some of these things and have been already. So hopefully, I think this will make for some good dialogue.
And I will, just one item, on January 29th, we are scheduled to come to the board to share raw and synthesized data that we've gathered over the course of, again, Guiding Coalition 1 and over the course of the last week. So we will be prepared and to share high-level themes and what we're hearing. Again, all that raw data and all those presentations will be made available to the public as we want this process to be very transparent and for everybody to consume.
I want to see that compilation of the posted wall.
Yeah.
So when's the next work session?
The next board work session?
I guess the question is the next board work session going to have this on the agenda, or is it?
Right, so the next board work session, I've been working with the board office to schedule January 29th, which I believe is a Tuesday.
Okay, so it's not your next, it's January.
Right, 29th.
That's a board meeting.
Board meeting, I apologize. So we'll come to the board in a board meeting to present that data.
So I have, just based on this dialogue, just a request of the superintendent, when we reach that sort of inflection point, when we shift from the completion of the vision to the strategic plan, that we have a very deliberate sort of start of the process with the board and staff together, so that we can, again, look at our sort of respective roles in that work, and that we are deliberate in the launch of it.
Yeah, I don't think it would surprise the board to know that probably sort of year 1, 2 of any strategic plan is going to continue to fortify some foundational work that we've been doing. So we don't have to wait for the conclusion of the vision to already start to speak about some big areas. We started the meeting talking about some of those core curriculum, assessment, GATE, ELs. What does it look like to operationalize, to the next level our work as a school system, which will then build upon towards some of these attributes we want to see in our graduate profile.
Definitely. So by end of February, early March, we should have a real clear understanding of what community is thinking around the future of public education here in the city. So again, we won't have a finalized, glossy, thing to share with the broader community as there are ongoing conversations, but we will get a sense, of what the community is saying about, again, the graduate profile, the adult portraits, the shifts that we have to make as a system, et cetera, which have been outlined in the RFP.
And I think I said what I said because it may not feel like today's the day that we're launching the start of our strategic plan. There will be a time when we make that conscious sort of pivot, but some of the groundwork that will go into it is the work that we've been doing. So we're going to look forward to sort of more formally sort of engaging the board in sort of a work plan for how we articulate that strategic plan. I also know that senior leadership will be spending some time as an invited guest at the Public Education Leadership Project at the Harvard Business School. So we do have a formal invitation to send a small team. And my hope is that we do some continued polishing in residence there with the benefit of some critical thought partners which is a great place to do that and a place where I've been able to do that with other teams in the past.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the rest of the board agenda, business agenda? Okay, the board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Student Representative Paisler?
Yes.
The business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Okay, are there any board committee or conference reports or student representative report? Do you want to?
Yeah, so just a few things. Last night, I had the great opportunity to go to volunteer with Cleveland High School that partnered with the Blazers last night at their Blazer game. And so my sister and I, actually, she's a freshman at Cleveland, a couple of her friends spent the first half of the Blazers game walking around and trying to get money to collect raffle tickets for people to go and do a raffle. And so half of the money that was raised will go to Cleveland High School and half of the money that raised will go to the person who won. But I think in total the teams made just shy of $6,500. I think my team with my sister, we made like $800 out of the whole thing. So it was a lot of fun. And I'm really glad to be seeing those partnerships take place in our community. And yeah, just a really great time to be involved with Cleveland last night. After finals are over, I am looking forward to schedule some more meetings, like the superintendent talked about earlier tonight about the security resource officers vote. I really want to take more time to get student input on that. I know the vote took place on PBS's end, but as my position, I feel like it's my duty to get more student input on that. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And then
Can I ask you something on that too? Just to make sure that we really do a lot of outreach for those students of color and those affinity groups? Sure, I'm sure you have that in mind already. Yeah, perfect.
No, definitely. And I already have some of the clubs and organizations in my mind ready to go. So looking forward to that, as well as I know we talked a little bit about the student representative policy tonight, but after February, beginning to meeting with my council again and some senior leadership team of PBS to get working on that and make our amendments and edits to that as well. So a lot coming in the next month.
Good luck with finals to you and everybody.
Yeah,
Don't
I was
let
gonna say
yourself
too,
get
actually.
too stressed out.
Good luck to all the high school kids.
Yep.
Anybody else have a report on anything?
I do. So this Thursday, we have a Policy and Governance Committee meeting. We will be having another review of the purchasing and contracting rules, which is a continuation from the last meeting. We'll also be reviewing any potential Secretary of State action items. There was a couple of recommendations for some policies, so we'll be looking at sort of scheduling that onto our calendars. In addition, we will potentially have a discussion about the student assignment to neighborhood schools and the legacy policy, although that probably won't be acted upon, but there may be a discussion. We will discuss the student rep policy language change. We will also have 4 or 5 new policies for first reading for rescissions. And let's see what else we'll have. We also have the issues we just had first reading. We'll have in public comment in addition. So that's Policy and Governance Committee meeting, and then the Audit Committee will meet on the 16th from 5 to 7, and we'll be covering a variety of topics. I'm sure the Secretary of State audits will be one of them, but also between now and then, we'll have 2 days of interviews of our internal audit, internal performance auditors, and I guess we'll notify board leadership that we likely will need some sort of resolution authorizing the committee to make a recommendation and a hire, since this is one of the few positions other than the superintendent that the board will hire, and we'll look for guidance from you, Ms. Large, on how to do that correctly.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I continue to take part with the central office staff on the sort of the core group around the vision process, and Jonathan talked a lot about the work that we're doing. And if you remember a couple of months ago when I said, yeah, I think we need to do about 40 or so of these outreach meetings, and I think there was some stunned disbelief.
I think I heard gasps.
Yeah, and there's, I think, that has turned into enthusiasm.
Are you attending them all?
Every single one, yeah.
I want to hear that.
Well, Jonathan shared out the initial schedule, so there's a lot of meetings out there with a lot of different constituencies. So it's pretty exciting to see that mix of, a big tent meeting, but also a lot of targeted meetings to make sure that we really connect with the full diversity of our community.
Yeah. It's great to see those
pretty
all
cool.
lined up and who they all are, and
Yeah.
good work.
And I guess one last announcement, on Friday, the Legislative and Intergovernmental Relations Committee will be meeting at 10:30. And we'll be meeting on basically what the name of the committee is, mostly legislative affairs at this point. Okay, anything else? Any other business for the good of the order? Okay, thank you, everybody. The next regular board meeting is January 29th. The next meeting of the board will be a work session on January 15th. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.